Hello students. Today we will learn about carburetors. So which is one of the element of fuel injection system. So first of all, carburetor. So what are the main functions of a carburetor? Functions of carburetor. So the main functions are carburetor keeps a small reserve of fuel at constant head. So to keep a small reserve of fuel at constant head. Okay. Then to vaporize the fuel to prepare a homogeneous air fuel mixture. So it will keep a small amount of fuel at constant head, that is as reserve. Then it will vaporize the fuel to prepare a homogeneous air fuel mixture. Then to supply correct amount of air fuel mixture at the correct strength under all conditions of load and speed of the engine. So the carburetor is responsible for supplying correct amount of fuel, air and fuel mixture. Correct amount of air fuel mixture at correct strength under all conditions of load and speed of the engine. So irrespective of load and speed of the engine, the carburetor must supply correct amount of air fuel mixture at correct strength. And the carburetor vaporizes the fuel, that is it will convert the fuel into vapors to prepare homogeneous, that is correct combination of air and fuel mixture. Then now we will discuss the working of a simple carburetor. The principle of carburetor is carburation, that is carburation is nothing but atomization and vaporization. The principle of a carburetor is carburation. It means atomization and vaporization. Okay. So the main components of carburetor are the main components of carburetor are it consists of a float chamber, then there is a fuel jet, then there is a venturi, then there is a nozzle, then there is a throttle valve. So these are the main components of the carburetor. So the float in the float chamber is made up of deep drawn brass sheet and it's kept hollow for lightness. So the float is made up of deep drawn. So drawing is one of the mechanical operation. Okay. So deep drawn brass sheet and it is kept hollow for lightness. So these floats, that is which are deep drawn, which which are made from deep drawn brass sheets, they sometimes will have the tendency to leak along the joint seams. So they have the tendency, usually they will leak along the joint seams. To leak along the joint seams. So because of this, the floats now are made up of nylon plastic or expanded synthetic rubber. So due to this, the float are now made up of nylon plastic or expanded synthetic rubber. There is a needle valve which is attached to the float lever, which will serve to close or open the fuel inlet to the float chamber depending on the requirements. So there is a needle valve which is attached to the float lever. Needle valve attached to the float lever, which serves to close or open the fuel inlet to the float chamber depending upon the requirement. So this needle valve consists of cylindrical stem with a conical tip which is made up of steel or else solid steam with a rubber seat tip. So this needle valve here, you can see there is a valve here which is something like this. Okay, so it has a cylindrical stem. This is the stem which is cylindrical in shape and there is a conical tip. So this is the stem and this is the tip. The needle valve consists of a cylindrical stem with a conical tip which is made of steel or steel stem with rubber seat tip. So now, what is the function of this carburetor? What does it actually? So here you can see there is a valve here and this is the float chamber in which there is a fuel jet. Okay, there is a vent provided in between. So we have discussed about the functions of the carburetor. Now what is the working of this carburetor? How does this work? So during the suction stroke, the air flows from the atmosphere into the cylinder. So here you can see during the suction stroke, this is the cylinder here. During the suction, what happens? The air will flow inside this cylinder. So as the air passes through the venturi, so here there is a venturi here. When the air passes through the venturi, velocity of the air will increase and its pressure will fall below the atmosphere. So during the suction stroke, what happens? Air will flow inside the cylinder and then it will pass through this venturi. So what happens then is when it passes through the venturi, then the velocity of the air will increase and its pressure will fall below the atmospheric pressure. Now the pressure at the nozzle. Okay, so this is the venturi here and this is the nozzle, okay, which is mentioned here. So the pressure at the nozzle tip is also below the atmospheric pressure. Okay, here this is the tip of the nozzle. The pressure at this tip is also below the atmospheric pressure. Then the pressure on the fuel surface of the fuel tank is at atmospheric pressure. So this is the fuel tank. Okay, so it contains fuel, and the surface of this fuel tank has atmospheric pressure. So because of this, there is a pressure difference created which will cause the fuel to flow through the fuel jet into the air stream. So there is a fuel jet here. What happens because of the pressure difference between this portion and this portion of the carburetor? The fuel will start flowing into the fuel uh, uh, fuel will start flowing through the fuel jet into the air stream. So as the air and fuel pass ahead of the venturi, so when the this is the fuel jet, and when the fuel and air passes through the venturi, the fuel will get vaporized and the required uniform mixture is supplied to the engine. So here the only important thing which we have to remember is the pressure difference between the fuel surface in the fuel tank and the pressure at the nozzle will cause the fuel to flow into the air stream. So here, so during the suction stroke, air flows from the atmosphere into the cylinder. So as the air passes through the venturi, velocity of air will increases, and its pressure falls below the atmosphere. The pressure at the nozzle tip is also below atmospheric pressure. The pressure on the fuel surface in the fuel tank is atmospheric pressure. So due to which, so there is a pressure difference created, due to which a pressure difference is created, which causes the flow of fuel through the fuel jet into the air stream. Flow of fuel through the fuel jet into the air stream. So as the fuel and air passes ahead of the venturi, the fuel gets vaporized and required uniform mixture is supplied to the engine. So this is about the working supplied to the engine. So this is all about the working of the carburetor. I hope you have understood what are the functions of carburetor and how it works. Thank you.